Yes, guys, it is that time of year again when people openly start to ask the question whether Hamilton will retire after this year due to the underperforming W14. Although I prefer to make analyses that talk more in depth about car and driver performances, I did deem this topic important enough to share with you what Hamilton said after being asked when he will retire, especially after both Jenson Button and Damon Hill recently already questioned Hamilton's motivation to continue. However, I will not only talk about Hamilton's retirement, but also what he really thinks about the performance of the Mercedes W14. Where does Hamilton see the problem with the car? What does Toto Wolff say about keeping Hamilton on board at Mercedes? And what other good news for Mercedes fans is there to share? Let's start. Hamilton signed up to undergo a lie detector test with Sky Sports to unravel some of his secrets. In an 8-minute interview, questions were asked about who he likes the most as a teammate, whether he likes the attention in F1, and even if he ever peed in his pants during an F1 race. But the most pressing question was whether Hamilton would continue until he finally succeeded in getting his 8th world title. As an F1 fan myself, I am aware that the topic of Hamilton's 8th world title can come quite emotional among fans. So I would like to ask you all to please keep it civilized in the comments section. I deem the rivalry in this sport as one of its most attractive parts, but competition can also quickly turn to hate. So again, I love to hear your opinion, but let's respect each and every one. Okay, let's continue. Lewis is, at 38 years old, the second oldest driver on the grid after Fernando Alonso, who is currently 41. However, if there is one thing that both Hamilton and Alonso prove, it is that talent does not disappear when becoming older. Last weekend, we saw an amazing fight between two old teammates, who 16 years ago despised each other. Funny enough, one of the questions asked by Sky Sports was about their relationship. Was Fernando your favorite teammate? In which Hamilton expectedly replied, no. When he was asked about his favorite teammate, Hamilton quickly pointed out Bottas. To quote Lewis, Valtteri and I had fun. We had fun over the years, and although he did try to beat me, there was really a camaraderie. There were no games played between us. Playing games is something that Hamilton did confirm happening when being Fernando's teammate at McLaren in 2007. The whole situation eventually cost McLaren the Drivers' Championship. A similar situation unfolded in 2016 when Nico Rosberg was Hamilton's teammate and the engineers allocated to each driver had to switch sides. Eventually, the whole situation cost Hamilton and Rosberg their friendship, which up until they became teammates was very strong. So now, to the question fans have basically been waiting for. Is Hamilton going to retire soon? No. When Sky Sports asked Lewis whether he will continue in F1 until he has his 8th world title, he firmly said yes. This was then confirmed by the lie detector test, which brought a big smile on the interviewer's face. As a response to all the rumors, he said, "It is ultimately people creating rumors without facts. It is never helpful. You would have thought that Button and Hill would both know me by now." Even more assuring is the fact that Hamilton admitted he is still not bored by F1, although he did acknowledge that he prefers being on vacation than racing. But that Hamilton is still motivated is something we can see in his interviews, where Russell and to a certain extent Wolff already gave up on this year to become a title contender. Hamilton is still optimistic that they can close the gap somewhere this year. This is something that Horner, team boss of Red Bull, thinks as well. In an interview with F1.com, he said, "I think that the operational windows of these cars are very narrow. Every team in the top 3 seem to have developed their own concept. I think that at one point, things are coming together at one point for both Ferrari and Mercedes. The budget cap makes it extra challenging to keep our lead." What should give fans some hope for this year is that Mercedes made a bold move by bringing back the aerodynamic genius James Allison. After 4 extremely successful years, Allison moved up as the CTO of the Ineos sailing department. However, its successor, Mike Elliott, who had the lead over the 2022 car and this year's car, clearly failed in designing a race-winning car. As a result, Allison is brought back to the F1 team, while Elliott is repositioned to the livery design team. Mercedes needs a boost in quality personnel after both Aston Martin and Red Bull hired many of the staff of Mercedes. In a podcast from Auto, Motor und Sport, Michael Schmidt explains that they lost the number 1 of the aero department to Aston Martin and the number 2 to Red Bull. What was even worse is the fact that these changes happened right before the introduction of the biggest rule change in F1 in over 40 years. What is even more frustrating is the fact that Toto Wolff already completely dismissed the concept of the W14, which brings them back to the drawing board as there is no clear Plan B ready according to Hamilton. He said, "I see people talk about a Plan B, but there is no Plan B. That is nonsense. To redesign and build a car, you have to go back to zero. We don't have time and money to do that in one season. We will keep developing this car and push it to its limits. I know I have the best team behind me to close the gap, but it is up to us to find the performance as quickly as possible." This is in pure contrast to what Toto had to say. "I don't think this package is going to be competitive. There is clearly one concept that works at the moment." But with all the problems surrounding the W14, we almost forgot that it is Hamilton's last season under his contract. So what did Wolff say after the race weekend when he was asked about it? But before we continue, I would like to ask you to subscribe to my channel, as it means a lot to me and everyone involved in producing this content. Now, let's continue. I don't think it is good to talk about the driver situation for 2024. That is far too early. We need to all push in the same directions, the drivers, the engineers, all of us in management, rather than, like what I said, throwing in the towel. We are not doing that. We never have done that, and we will not be doing that. Now that we have confirmation that we will see Hamilton on the grid for a longer period of time, let's make a quick analysis about Mercedes' car problems. After the race, Hamilton was quite straightforward with their issues: downforce levels and tire degradation. The W14's biggest problem lies in the lack of downforce compared to Aston Martin and Red Bull. Although Mercedes finally solved their top speed issue as shown in this graph, they did have to sacrifice downforce levels to reach that. Normally, different front and rear wings can increase downforce levels, but with the 2023 car regulations, most of the downforce in medium and high-speed corners is generated through the floor in the form of the ground effect. In theory, the lower the car sits at the bottom, the faster the airflow, and therefore the stronger the ground effect, which technically sucks the car to the ground. The design of the W14 itself generates less downforce, which became extremely visible during Sector 2 of the Bahrain race. The lack of downforce brought another problem with it. Reduced downforce makes the car slide more and increases tire temperatures. This makes it easier to overheat them, which as a result increases tire degradation. Furthermore, the Mercedes also has a lack of mechanical grip compared to Aston Martin and Red Bull. The mechanical grip is the grip provided through the tires and suspension. Teams can change the angle of the tires to improve responsiveness and grip levels, but the more extreme these angles are, the larger the offset, which in many cases increases tire wear. It is hard to find balance for Mercedes, as using higher downforce wings will set them back in overall top speed. Ironically, Russell seemed to drive with more downforce, but eventually had higher tire degradation than Mercedes. It makes the German-British team extremely question what to do next. Although it is confirmed that Mercedes will soon bring new bodywork to the track, it does not mean that they make a big step forward. Toto Wolff said on Monday that his team needs to look for drastic changes that are bringing them more than only 0.3 of a second. Do you think Hamilton will ever get his 8th world title at Mercedes? Do you think they are able to close the gap to Red Bull? Let me know in the comments section below.